An entire pirate crew marched to the gallows together, believing they would die as brothers beneath the black flag. But the British Crown transformed their mass execution into a nightmare that echoed across the Atlantic, leaving their bodies to rot above the Thames in iron gibbets, so every passing sailor would understand that the age of piracy would end not with treasure or glory, but with public terror, disgrace, and death. Enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe. Trace your finger along the map from the Thames estuary to Execution Dock, and picture the year 1722 as the smell of rotting oak, boiling pine tar, a damp hemp rigging, stale bilge water, wet wool, coal smoke, and salty river mud drifted across London's crowded waterfront beneath a cold gray sky. The tide crept slowly around barnacled pilings while merchant brigs, naval sloops, and East Indiamen rocked against heavy mooring lines whose twisted hemp fibers groaned beneath constant strain. Word had spread through every tavern that an entire pirate crew would die together before the rising tide completed its cycle. Their capture had ended months of relentless pursuit, following attacks carried out without valid letters of marque, placing every surviving sailor beyond the protection of maritime law. Iron shackles weighing nearly 15 pounds linked each prisoner's ankles, while forged wrist manacles chafed flesh, already scarred by years of hauling braces, reefing topsails, turning capstans, and firing bronze carriage guns mounted upon weathered oak trucks. Their former vessel displaced roughly 120 tons with pronounced tumble home, supported by massive oak futtocks fastened using hand-forged iron spikes driven deep into seasoned frames before every seam had been packed with twisted oakum and sealed beneath boiling pine tar during repeated careening operations in tropical anchorages. Even after months inside prison cells, the scent of salt remained trapped within their clothing, mixing with damp straw and rust as guards marched them toward the scaffold through silent streets, crowded by thousands awaiting a punishment designed not merely to kill pirates, but to terrify every sailor who dreamed of raising the black flag. The condemned men advanced beneath constant guard, while church bells echoed across the river, and spectators climbed rooftops, warehouses, and anchored barges for a better view. Every pirate wore coarse linen stained by weeks inside Newgate prison, yet traces of hardened tar still clung beneath cracked fingernails from countless repairs to standing rigging and weather-beaten hull planking. Months earlier, their articles of agreement had promised equal shares of captured cargo, compensation for lost limbs, and strict discipline during battle. But those handwritten rules carried no authority before the Admiralty Court. Witnesses described merchant ships shattered by repeated broadsides from bronze 6-pounder cannon, cast from an alloy containing roughly 88% copper, 10% tin, and small traces of lead to improve fluidity during casting. Each gun fired black powder composed primarily of potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur, ignited through a glowing slow match that flashed through the touch hole before rapidly generating expanding gases powerful enough to launch an iron-round shot weighing nearly 6 pounds. The projectile struck oak hulls with overwhelming force, shearing long splinters from dense planking as fractured wood became deadly secondary missiles capable of tearing through muscle, tendons, and bone more brutally than the cannonball itself. Such evidence filled courtroom testimony for days until every prisoner received the same sentence. Now heavy ropes woven from tightly laid hemp strands hung motionless above the scaffold, each carefully inspected by the executioner because a failed hanging could transform royal justice into public humiliation, something the Crown refused to risk after years of pirate defiance. The scaffold itself stood beside the river so the execution would occur according to ancient maritime custom, allowing the incoming tide to wash beneath the bodies before they were finally removed. Royal officials believed this ritual emphasized that crimes committed upon the sea would be judged by the sea as well. Naval officers, customs inspectors, merchants, and foreign diplomats watched together, recognizing that the destruction of one notorious crew carried enormous political significance for Atlantic commerce. The prisoners exchanged few words, as the hangman positioned each man beneath an individual noose, fashioned from thick hemp rope, whose coarse fibers tightened immediately under sudden load. Several pirates stared toward the forest of masts rising beyond the docks, perhaps remembering voyages across the Bahamas, Jamaica, and the Windward Passage, where favorable trade winds once filled square sails stretched across heavy yards, suspended by iron-bound mast fittings. Their captured sloop had depended upon disciplined sail handling despite its criminal purpose, requiring coordinated movements along foot ropes high above the deck, where topmen balanced against violent rolling seas while adjusting braces, sheets, clew lines, and bunt lines. Even routine maintenance demanded endless labor because salt crystals penetrated every strand of rope, while ultraviolet sunlight weakened exposed hemp, forcing constant replacement to prevent catastrophic failure during storms. None of those hard-earned maritime skills mattered anymore. The final prayers ended, drums rolled across the crowded waterfront, and every eye fixed upon the executioner as he reached for the lever that would erase an entire pirate crew from the living world in a single, terrifying moment. With a single movement, the supports disappeared beneath their feet, and the full weight of every condemned pirate snapped downward simultaneously, causing the hemp ropes to stretch before violently recoiling under tremendous tension. The crowd fell silent, except for the creaking of timber beams, the groan of overloaded iron fittings, and the distant cries of gulls circling above the Thames. Executioners of the period understood that rope length determined the mechanics of death. A drop too short, prolonged strangulation as the carotid arteries slowly compressed, while a longer calculated fall could fracture the upper cervical vertebrae through sudden deceleration. Officials therefore measured each prisoner's approximate body mass before selecting an appropriate length intended to produce a swift but unmistakably public execution. Physicians standing nearby observed involuntary muscle contractions, changes in skin color, and the gradual stilling of movement, while clerks recorded the time according to Admiralty procedure. The incoming tide continued rising beneath the scaffold, washing against slime-covered pilings darkened by decades of river water and coal residue. Merchants quietly studied the grim spectacle because piracy had driven insurance costs upward across the Atlantic, delaying cargoes of sugar, tobacco, indigo, rum, and manufactured goods worth thousands of pounds sterling. The Crown intended every witness to connect commercial stability with ruthless enforcement, proving that organized piracy would no longer challenge expanding imperial trade routes, protected by increasingly aggressive Royal Navy patrols. When the bodies were finally declared lifeless, they did not immediately disappear from public view. Several were transferred into heavy iron gibbets, forged from riveted bands that enclosed the torso, arms, and legs before being suspended beside busy waterways, where thousands of passing sailors could see them for months or even years. Rain, salt air, freezing winters, and scorching summers slowly reduced the remains while the iron frames creaked in every Atlantic wind, becoming permanent warnings against returning to the Black Flag. The execution of an entire pirate crew together was more than a punishment. It was a calculated demonstration that the Golden Age of Piracy would end not through glorious sea battles, but through relentless pursuit, public trials, coordinated justice, and a scaffold built to ensure that fear changed sides forever. Long after the crowd dispersed, the image of those motionless figures remained fixed in the minds of every sailor entering the port of London. Captains repeated the story to new crews before crossing the Atlantic, reminding them that quick riches gained through piracy almost always ended beneath a hangman's rope. Royal governors strengthened cooperation with naval squadrons, merchant convoys became more organized, and pirate refugees steadily disappeared beneath relentless patrols. The day an entire pirate crew was hanged together became more than an execution. It became a turning point in maritime history, demonstrating that the era of unchecked pirate power could be broken through determined law enforcement, overwhelming naval pressure, and public punishment designed to outlive the condemned themselves.